From Theory to Operations, the latest in AI development and the law with Sean McDonald. That is your topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas, and I have my colleague Sean McDonald, AI tech guru, back to talk about AI development and the law. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
Yes, absolutely. And so, Sean, we've been talking. You've been with me before to discuss, AI development, but we're kind of wanting to make this more of a routine thing where you come back and give us the latest. And we had wanted to talk a number of days ago, right after the open AI announcements concerning ChatGPT for Omni and Google Gemini's developments as well. However, we had some like tornadoes in the
Yeah.
Houston area, which kind of delayed things. But I'm glad that all that's finishing up and we're recovering just fine. So it's good to connect back with you and find out the latest. And I got some questions for you here for the audience and people who specifically are in the legal field, or mediation field, judges, lawyers, sometimes people who are not lawyers or judges, but who just want to know what's the latest, what's going on. And we're in May 2024, as of this recording, because technology changes so fast. So why don't we get started? Overall, Sean, why don't you give us the big picture of what you've kind of seen, and then we'll dive down into some questions. But one more thing before that. In my mail, I got my typical advertisement that's coming in these days from LexisNexis, telling me how I need to sign up for LexisNexis Plus AI so that I can get help answering my most legal complex questions. So companies are getting into this action, and a lot of lawyers are being just slammed with a lot of mail from tech companies focused on moving us forward into the AI world. I just want to start off with that to let you know, look, this is going from theory to operations. And what can you add to this?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great description for where the industry's at as a whole, which is going from theory to operation. We've heard a lot of talk about the role of AI in society, a lot of talk about the transformative nature of AI. And we've even heard, people talking about, do we need universal basic income? And will the robots take all the jobs? And those are interesting questions, but none of them apply operationally to any business that I know of today. I think when you see tech layoffs, they're partly due to AI efficiencies, but I don't think that's the sole issue going on. So, it's like we were talking beforehand. Uh, while it's an interesting legal theory question about using certain celebrities' voices for voice cloning, it actually doesn't matter if you're the one using the AI. If you're an attorney talking to an intelligent AI, the flavor of the voice may matter a little bit, but it's not what provides you the value or saves your client from the big bill or whatever it is that you're working on, right? And and so
You're referring to the Scarlett Johansson
yes.
debacle
Yeah,
that's
that
kind of
debacle,
happened.
right?
Yeah, but give us a quick backstory for people who might not be familiar.
Sure. So right now there's a big debate where there's a famous movie from maybe 20 years ago about a ubiquitous AI where Scarlett Johansson voiced the AI. And OpenAI has hired an actor, and this woman's voice is, arguably very similar, but the Scarlett Johansson and her team have said that this is basically a knockoff of her. And OpenAI has said, well, no, this is just a woman. They haven't disclosed her name, but she might as well be named, Tanya and live in Kansas City. And her voice just sounds that way. So it raises the theoretical question, which your audience would know better than me. Like, What happens? Can you make someone's voice illegal because of its similarity to someone else's voice? And that's beyond my understanding. But what I would stress is operationally, I don't know of a single instance where the big theory has been what's helping people build better companies or better lives with AI. What I've seen on the ground truth is we're getting questions like, how will these messages be archived? How will IT policy regulate the workflows of these new tools? For the example you held up in that advertisement, um, if you roll that out across your firm, what access does your IT manager who deals with compliance and safety have to the queries that your employees are making using that tool, right? These ground truth questions that my company and every company
Questions.
I know starting to hit. So happy to talk about the other big announcements and talk about some of the new models too. But I'd say really we're going from however interesting theory is, the operational questions are coming out in the industry.
And so a couple of years ago, all this was very theoretical. You were having people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman talk about where this is going to be taking us. Now, I think we've all kind of accepted that the technology is here to stay. And so, okay, what can we do with it to make our lives easier? And
Yep.
so recently, because of the fast pace of technology, OpenAI came out with ChatGPT for Omni. And I actually wasn't sure if it was, how do you pronounce it? Was it 4.0 or 4.0 or, oh, it's Omni, like omniscient. That's a little creepy, but it is the name. And
Yeah.
what's your takeaway from when you saw the announcements and seeing what this model has to do?
I think the best way to think about the rollout of new models and these companies is now something we're all familiar with, which is the auto industry. So from year to year, season to season, we hear the automakers tell us like, oh gosh, well, if you don't, you've got to get the new kind of tires because the new kind of tires really make driving that much better. And sometimes that's true, right? So sometimes the new type of tires make you a lot safer, right? When they started rolling out seat belts, that was a big deal, right? That was a huge innovation. Airbags, huge innovation. At the same time, we all know that you could buy a 2007. I buy pickup trucks, and so for folks who buy pickup trucks like me, a 2007 Toyota Tacoma will beat the pants off of a 2012, Ford F-150 for my personal tastes. And so newer doesn't always mean better. Innovation isn't always what the market or the user wants. And I think these models are like that, where there are some substantial improvements, but frankly, there's also some steps back. And I think one of the things that's very tricky to do, and everyone's getting a sense of this, is the more you try to regulate what these AI models do and say, the less performative they are in a lot of cases. So this is leading to a lot of interesting discussions. I can speak more about those, but I think these new models are more powerful, but they're not necessarily better. A lot of developers are actually using older models in some cases because they have more strengths at a certain subset of functions. So from this point forward, I guarantee you every month for the rest of our lives, we're going to hear a new AI feature from one of these companies. The question is, like automobiles, how much does that matter to you and your use cases?
So, compares wise, ChatGPT made some announcements, but also Google Gemini, and those were the big two I was noticing. I know Microsoft made some announcements as well, but how do ChatGPT for Omni and Google Gemini and their recent developments compare in terms of their new capabilities and limitations?
Yeah, so where a lot of developers are going, and everything I build and sell, it works this way, which is what we would call multi-model. So you'll also hear multimodal. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
Multi-model means that you actually build tools that cause these models and from the different companies to interact. And that's what's a good way to think of this, is that GPT-4 Omni is remarkable at handling voice processing and real-time conversation. But real-time conversation isn't how you do deep work in the law, right? Like, you often need to write a 10 paragraph email examining an issue to really think it through. And so you might find that GPT 4.0 is very great, good for that immediate real-time interaction. But then Google Gemini has a much longer, what's called context window. And what that means is basically how much data can it understand before it starts failing to understand in dangerous and incorrect ways. So
You
Gemini is very strong on
can
that.
you dumb that down a little bit, especially for me
Yeah,
when
to
it
use the
comes to the
car
context
analogy,
window? Yeah.
yeah, to use the car analogy, you might think of GPT 4.0 as like a Tesla. It's very, very fast. It's very powerful for the creature comforts, but you wouldn't use it to haul your boat. And you could think of Gemini as potentially more like a pickup truck. That maybe it isn't quite as zippy, but it can handle much bigger loads and take you further. Is that a helpful metaphor? Yeah,
Okay,
so
so
then
go
the
ahead.
other model I'll give a call out to that's really important right now that I know your audience will not have heard of, but if they're interested in this subject, there's a company that's really worth looking up, and I'll explain why it's so important. It's called Grok, which is GROQ. Very unique name. And what Grok has done is they've assembled a new type of hardware that only does one thing. It's a chip that just does this kind of large language model processing. Now, the revolution that's happened, the developers are paying attention to, is Facebook, Meta's latest open source model. Llama 3 is very powerful. And I can sincerely say I don't know any developers in AI who haven't tried running Llama 3 on Grok's hardware because it's so much faster than anything else that it really changes the game of what you can build as a software developer. It's essentially instant answers for very short queries. And so that's I want to call out that model because that is something different. OpenAI doesn't build chips.
Right.
So if you want to understand where all this is sort of playing out, it's hey, over here there's a subset of open source hardware and software that's actually really keeping up with the big guys in a new way.
Yeah, I know Nvidia has been on the news lately because they were kind of like the center of all of the chip revolution that was going on in the AI world. And I believe I heard in the business news that either today or tomorrow they're supposed to be releasing, earning calls about what's been going on financially with them. But I had not heard about Grok. I I
Yeah.
thought you were talking about Gork earlier with X, but but I don't know how Grok compares to NVIDIA. They're a chip maker as well.
It's a David and Goliath, right? Grok's a small startup company, but their chip works just shockingly well. Now, and it's also limited. You couldn't run your personal computer on it. It only does this very it you know it's to keep the automotive analogy. It's more like a maglev bullet train, right? Like it doesn't turn. It does this singular thing, but it does it much faster than any of the other models.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, but yeah.
But go ahead. But do you want to wrap up that part of the question about how do ChatGPT for Omni and Google Gemini compare in terms of limitations and capabilities?
Well, so I'll say the last thing is a practical tip for anyone in your audience is if you're working with a language model and you're not getting the results you want, just change to another one.
So I guess my shout out would be to a company called Magi, Magai, which all they do basically is have one portal you log into that has a bunch of different models, and then
There you
it
go.
picks the best one depending on the query or the prompt that you're putting in, and they so you can kind of compare, right? There is Llama, there's Claude, there's ChatGPT. They just put Omni there. There's of course Gemini, a couple different variations of it. So I subscribed to it recently after like a few days on free trial, just because I like to compare, and I'm getting a lot of good results depending on whatever the prompt might be. But one of my colleagues, Thomas Giulioni, who has been on the podcast before, discussed, how positive Claude is, for example, especially haiku. So I was testing that out, and yeah, blazingly fast, incredible, answers. Um, I'm still in the process of comparing all these different models, but anyway, I don't think Magi does much except have one convenient place to pull all these LMs together in one spot.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great tool to check out. I'll have to check it out myself. And I really I'd say I would stress that the main thing is to not get wrapped up in the notion that there's gonna be the one that does it best. It's your particular use case on your particular day, and you just bounce around till you find the one that's working. And I know that may sound kind of counterintuitive, but that's truly the
No,
best way to handle
I'm,
it.
I'm realizing that. All right, so next question. What are the potential implications of these new AI models for various industries and sectors like the law?
Well, that's a great question. Bigger than I can answer today, but I'll give three rapid bullet points that I think are foundationally important. One is we're about to see a lot of unnecessary things questioned. And I'll give you the biggest example, and this is what I work on, which is meetings, meetings themselves, which is if I build an AI to role play the different participants in a corporate board meeting, and I have the meeting agenda and the relevant data, and I simulate that meeting, it will be, in my experience, up to about 80% accurate as to what those people will say, think, and feel. Now, it's not a time machine. It's not going to say, in that day, Mac said he had a wonderful turkey sandwich. But in terms of what are their priorities, what are their concerns, what motivates them, what are their incentives, what are their values, we can actually simulate a great, vast number of our future interactions very effectively. Now, the same in the legal industry probably applies to judges and juries and their behaviors and their opinions. And so it raises this foundational question of what is work, right? If the majority of my work is going to meetings, but my participation in that meeting can be effectively simulated, what do I actually do? And why am I going to all of those meetings? Now, that can be very valuable for some people. And if people are interested, you can find me on X or at semantic-life.com. And that's what I do, is sort of help strategic planning by simulating the future. But then on a much more ground truth level, I think a big consideration is going to be what your daily commitment is to using these tools. And I think they're likely to be either ubiquitous or irrelevant. So I'll give you an example. If you're a bartender, I'm not really sure what an AI is going to do for you. I mean, maybe come up with clever new drink recipes, but if you're a good bartender, you can do that anyway, right? And so it'll remain irrelevant, or it'll become ubiquitous. And I just can't imagine, my sister-in-law is a legal assistant at a big firm. And I just can't imagine that the firm's going to stop having legal assistants. But I'm certain that the job of a legal assistant is about to be largely driven by AI-powered tools.
I see it already, even in my own office.
So it raises, to say that the sort of second thing is like, hey, it's very unlikely that small experiments are going to deliver big results. Companies are just going to have to say, hey, this is our new daily driver, right? This is what a legal assistant does. And that is a difficult and expensive transition, right? Because humans don't adapt quickly. So I'll say the third wave is, I'll look back to when CRM started. So I used to work with a lot of Salesforce installations. And Salesforce had this notorious issue where you would invest heavily in moving your big enterprise database over to Salesforce, and then your team wouldn't use it because they were sales agents and they were, selling dental implant packages to retail dentists in St. Louis at a conference drinking martinis last night. And it was counterintuitive to open up an app and tell the app about the martinis. And so it was this massive, massive adoption problem. And that's the third thing I'd say, is companies are going to have to ask, what are our policies here? Like, are we doing mandatory training? Are we incentivizing hiring for people who already have the skill set? are we doing re-education of our workforce writ large? Today, now, if you're running a mid-sized company and listening to this, I'm telling you, today is the day to ask those questions, because it will be unavoidable. Uh, Within a calendar year, it'll be all but unavoidable.
Gotcha. So, what are some of the ethical considerations and challenges associated with the development and use of such powerful AI tools? Very broad question. Obviously, you only got like a couple minutes to answer it, but
Sure, yeah. So I'd say since a lot of your audience is familiar with the law and
mm,
legal thinking, I would maybe reference a little bit of legal thinking. And we have get back to John Rawls. We have this like ethical consideration of like the veil of ignorance to get a little like deep on people, which was the idea of how would you design the world if you didn't know what character you were going to play in it, right? Like you'd want a fair world because you don't know if you're the powerful landholder or the impoverished worker. So you'd want to design a very fair and just world. And um, I think the biggest ethical consideration is not these big theoretical things. The biggest ethical consideration is whether or not we use these tools to provide a level playing field to just about everyone on Earth. And the thing I would applaud all of these companies for that gets lost in the day-to-day sort of, you know, arena battles of the big tech companies is that OpenAI has just released a tool that is free for up to 50 queries a day for anyone in the world to be educated on anything by a powerful voice assistant teacher that doesn't even require you to be literate. And so when we ask, these big ethical questions, I think we have to remember that, no matter these fears or concerns about the role of AI in jobs and economies, fundamentally, we're on the precipice of providing information and education as a free basic human right. And I think we should all just take a deep breath every day and remember that when we read the news, that like we're about to make information a human right.
definitely I'll link to that. I did see the example demo that they did where they were showing a dad and his son using
Yep.
the tool as a tutor,
Yep.
right? But I remember reading some of the comments and they were like, a lot of this is still gonna be based on the will and the drive of the student because
Yep.
it doesn't really matter how good of a tool you have, that has the capabilities of artificial intelligence. If you don't really want to learn, the tool is just gonna sit there.
That's right. That's right. And I think I would add in that's why we need to create opportunity. We need young people, especially, to say, hey, if I work hard, something good will come of it.
Okay, so how can businesses and organizations like law and mediation offices leverage these AI models to enhance their operations and their client experiences? These new
Yeah,
tools,
well,
especially those from
being
what I just
very
mentioned.
quick in the interest of time, I'll say I can provide you links to a couple great law startups. There's one in Santa Monica here called Standard Draft that standardizes agreements across an organization. Really, right? If you sign 2,000 real estate deals a year, they're very sloppy. They don't they're not internally consistent. So they have an AI tool to standardize your agreements. So very powerful. So I think that give a shout out to Ryan Sammy, the founder of that company. But and then my company, Semantic Life, we do things like we can synthesize a jury and demo how they would react. We can synthesize opposing counsel and demo how they would react. So we do that, and that's a powerful way to do it. And then I'll say probably the biggest thing I know of, I'd say doing research is still a little iffy, right? Large language models do hallucinate. You'll get some good results. It won't all be true. I think the magic word for people is role playing. You don't have to hire me. If you're an attorney and you want an AI to pretend to be a 47-year-old Asian American woman who runs a BMW dealership in Sacramento, you can just go onto GPT-4 and say, hey, will you pretend to be this person? And it's a phenomenal role player. So
And
I'd start there.
yeah, the role playing also extends to mediation as well, right? Mediating with robots or having the robot be the mediator and you can role play with other parties. And so this is really good, not just for practicing, but also to see possible outcomes in a
Exactly.
scenario. All right. And lastly, what are the future directions and developments we can expect in the field of AI language models, especially from what just happened recently? What does the future hold?
It's one simple answer is on-demand apps.
Okay.
So if you want to see where it goes, a good company to check out is called Replit, Replit, and it's a code hosting platform that makes it easy to manage and deploy code. But what Replit's on the verge of is a code writing AI. And what that means is they put out a demo where there's a type of clock called a Tabata timer. I know this sounds weird. CrossFit people use it to monitor their workouts and like make the alarm go off every 90 seconds and all this stuff. And they put out a demo, like normally you'd go pay $1.99 at the App Store to get a Tabata timer, right? On the Replit app, they said, build a Tabata timer for me. And the AI coded the Tabata timer and deployed it to their private, Replit, and then they just had it on their phone as their own app that they own.
Hold your own technology now.
So
Amazing stuff.
imagine if you're to give a very specific example, let's say, I know in Texas you have a lot of very nuanced energy law. And so you'll get things where there's like an attorney who's an expert on landholder rights to access oil company turn valves in certain counties, right? This very, very, very nuanced thing. That attorney soon would be able to say, build an app for me where I can take photos and satellites of a site and you point out all 30 violations based on current Texas law. And the app will self-assemble into his like new app that he calls whatever, Alpha Oil app. And now he just opens his own app and it does that for him. He didn't go download it or pay for it or anything. And that's absolutely where all this ends up.
Interesting. All right. Well, Sean, we're out of time. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for your words of wisdom today on theory to operations and how we're going to understand the latest of what just happened from ChatGPT, OpenAI, Google Gemini, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and all these other companies. But thank you so much for all the other shout outs and links you provided today. So I'm going to make sure I put the links on the bottom of the show notes so that people can click on them. So a few of them I want to check out myself just so I can kind of, see what it's all about. I don't know about Replit, but I'm going to now. And
Yeah.
you talked
Really
about
cool.
standard drafts before, and of course, semantic life. Thank you so much for all the role
Yeah.
playing advice you've given us. All right, guys. So until
Awesome.
next time, everybody, check everybody out on lmipodcast.com, Sean and other guests we've had, and specifically this topic because this is not going anywhere, and AI is going to be with us. So thank you so much, Sean.
Awesome. Thanks, Mac. Have a good day. Bye.